The baseball winter meetings.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. Hockey night is what we have. Great night. Can't be asked at me yet. Surrounded by two of the best people on the planet, George Eichhorn and Mike Sanchez. Glad to have both of you back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, loaded show tonight, and I mean a real busy show. Mike and I mastered the rapid fire real well, and we're going to add George to it, and he'll see how fast these shows can go. But there's a lot of information. If you don't get it on the first shot, please go out there and rewind it and watch it again. So we'll get to it right away. So as we approach Memorial Day weekend, be careful on the road. Ilya Kovalchuk has been racking up more penalties off the ice than he ever did on it. Get this, in the last 18 months, he has 115 speeding tickets. Mike, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about this a couple weeks ago, didn't we? With another guy.
Yeah, but not him.
But I don't know. It seems to be a common theme with some of these players, particularly the guys from on the other side of the pond. But hopefully he doesn't injure someone or himself, or worse, kill somebody. There's a guy named Danny Heatley who was playing for the Atlanta Thrashers who ended up killing one of his best friends in a car accident, and another guy named Craig McTavish who hit a young lady from behind on Route 1 in Boston when he was playing for the Bruins, and neither one of those situations ended well. So hopefully Wilcock starts to do things a little bit better behind the wheel.
Yeah, it's sad. All right, well, with Joshua Doors, we'll Panther fan. Let's go Panthers. I'm sure he'll catch it on the rewind, understand he's going to be watching the game. But here's the thing. Joshua Candy's going to be providing updates throughout the show as well. And we'll instruct her to make sure that all scores will definitely be shown. All right, George, some thoughts about Mr. Kovalchuk.
Well, this is a situation where, and Mike, you might know, but the resources of the team, is there anybody in that front office that can help that guy out? I mean, you can't continue to take a chance with that many tickets, that many potential accidents. I agree with you. And you've cited two horrific former players that have had trouble. But, and it's not just hockey. It's not just hockey. We see it all the time with other sports as well. But the team, and get him some help that he needs. I don't know what else you can do. I mean, just don't be a leadfoot. What else are you going to say? But it's scary to me.
Yeah, I think you're right, George. It is scary, and all the teams that I worked with, I would actually set up a meeting at the beginning of the year. I would do it with our minor league players as well, with their clubs, with a local attorney, and we would go through all the different types of things that can come up from, whether that was, incidents on the road, driving too fast, driving after you've had a couple of drinks, the types of things that can happen in public, whether it's in a restaurant or a bar when you're approached by somebody, and you try to impress upon them, especially all that they have to lose in these situations. And when it involves, unfortunately, like the two situations I mentioned earlier, when it involves the taking of a life, another life, especially, that's something you're gonna live with for the rest of your life. So I don't know. I don't know what more you can do. I mean, this isn't a young kid we're talking about either.
Right.
Been around, right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old. So,
yeah.
It's time to grow up before something really bad happens.
115 speeding tickets. That's a lot. It really is. Hate to see it. Really do. All right, so let's continue. There'll be a lot of Panthers stuff that we're going to put in. Obviously, they're still playing hockey, and believe me, there's plenty of notes that'll definitely fill this show, and a lot of other good human interest stories as well. wanted to get this one off in the spirit of the Memorial Day weekend. Messages, please be safe on the roads. Doesn't really affect you, but others. And I'll tell you why I mentioned that. I suffered a major hand injury over the last 4 or 5 weeks and pulled myself off the road where I broke my thumb. And I've been in a splint for a while, and I said, I'm not driving. I don't want to hurt nobody or myself, let alone injure my vehicle. So you have to be responsible. That's why this topic is 115 speeding ticket, Heatley, and Savage bad stuff. All right.
Let me add one more thing to that too. It just came to mind, but there was another incident in the late '80s with a goalie from Philadelphia named Pelle Lindbergh.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Who used to love to drive his Porsche real fast, and one night he was driving his Porsche real fast, lost control, hit a tree, and killed himself.
Wow.
Yes.
I remember that.
Yeah. He sure did.
That was tragic too. I remember when that happened.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for bringing it up. All right. Well, the NHL suspend Panthers owner for inappropriate post directed at Leafs fans. Part owner Doug Sifu has been suspended indefinitely from any involvement with the club and the NHL. He deleted the actual rant at a Maple Leafs fan. So, question: is that the right discipline? And would you take his name off the top? I know there's been talk about that too.
I met Doug Sifu when that ownership group first took over the Panthers. Seems like a nice enough guy. I'm always baffled when people who are obviously intelligent enough and smart enough and successful enough to be able to own even own a piece of $1 billion sports organization,
Right.
and they do something as stupid as this. And regardless of what side you are on the conflict over there, and I don't even want to repeat what Sifu said, or
I paraphrase it like I did.
I mean, we had two Jewish nationals that were killed last night in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Part of this.
Wow.
For God's sakes, this is sports. You're the owner of a team who, by the way, is a defending Stanley Cup champion, has been doing real well. And you're going to engage with a fan of the other team on Twitter
Right.
in this foolishness, and then say something like that. You know what? I don't know what suspending an owner really means, to be honest with you. I don't really care if his name stays on the Stanley Cup or it doesn't stay on the Stanley Cup. I don't think this has anything to do with that.
Right.
You know what I think his punishment is? I think his punishment is his mommy should take his phone away until he's responsible enough to use it.
I don't have much more to add to that. What about you, George?
No, that's a pretty good. That's a pretty good summation. I mean, yeah, there's still, like you said, you're so involved in the running of the team, the ownership group, and all that goes with that. That yes, don't engage in that kind of behavior or that kind of tit for tat or whatever he was doing. Fans are one, and and I know people are different, but we used to have a guy on. He wasn't on this week, as Scott knows, Jacob Christner. He hates every fan. Every fan is stupid. No, I'm not going to say something like that. But in a situation like this, like you said, your team is running and defending the cup. No, stay away from that stuff. Don't even put yourself in that position where you have to face a suspension from the league, which he's doing.
Yeah, you're right, George. I mean, fans are fans, and they can be fans. You're not a fan. You're an owner.
Right.
Right.
I got two people on this show that speak for me. I'm not in any danger of losing my voice. I have you two guys talking about. No way. I got other things to worry about, but not that. Thanks. Well done on that topic. I'm leaving it alone. But I'm not going to leave the fact that we're going to talk about Hot Connor Hellebuck. Heck of a goaltender. He really is. Became the third U.S.-born goaltender to record multiple shutouts in 2 series. Also in 2018, round 1. And obviously he joined Tim Thomas, obviously did it 2 in 2011, the Stanley Cup Finals and the conference finals. And then you also have Mike Richter in 1987 in the conference semifinals and the conference finals. And it just blows me away. Hellebuck defeated Dallas 4-0 on that particular Thursday, the second shutout to face, fortunately, Game 6. Unfortunately for Big D, it didn't work out. But he put himself in some pretty good company with that, didn't he, Mike? I mean, albeit the Stars, they're in the finals, but Hellebuck has done a tremendous job with the Winnipeg Jets. And a U.S.-born goaltender doing this, I think the guy is unbelievable. He really is.
He's a fantastic goalie. Michigan kid, had a great college career at University of Massachusetts Lowell. Took them to their only Frozen Four appearance, in the program's history. Has had great seasons in the NHL and back-to-back really good seasons, perhaps the top goaltender in the league the last 2 years in the regular season.
Right.
But if you want to be, put in the same category as the guys you mentioned, Mike Richter and Tim Thomas, great goalies, you better get out of the second round of the playoffs.
Right.
I don't care how many shutouts you have. If the next game you let up 6 or 7, it's not good enough. And I think he'd say the same thing. I think he's a tremendous goalie, but if he's going to get his flowers, it's going to be when he gets over that hump and becomes a goalie that can, look, it takes a lot to win a Stanley Cup, but a hot goalie that can get you closer than the second round, and that's what he's got to do.
George.
Yeah, you're exactly right, guys. I mean, we all hear about the hot goalie and how important it is in the Stanley Cup playoffs. No question about it. And I'm proud of him too. Like you said, Mike, he's from my home state, Michigan. He's 32 now, and it's one thing to say statistically, he's accomplished this and accomplished that, but the bottom line is, like you said, he's got to get them into the Cup finals. They've got a good team. They've had a good team for several years, the Jets, and now it's time to. And it's not just him. I don't mean just him. Okay, but like we already talked about, he can stand on his head. But if the other components aren't working, the power play's not working, or they're not scoring enough goals, the Jets, they're going to have problems. And you're right, it is a huge disappointment because we got Dallas and Edmonton. We don't have Winnipeg in the conference finals right now. But he is a great goaltender. I agree. American born. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, Tim Thomas, Mike Richter, shutouts in the playoffs. Great. They each won a cup, right?
Yeah.
Jonathan Quick, U.S. goalie. He
yeah.
won a couple of cups, right? What about Tom Barrasso, U.S. goalie? Couple of cups. Obviously, they didn't have as many shutouts in the playoffs as Hellebuck, but
yeah.
who would you want in the big game right now in the playoffs, right? So I'm sorry, it's the nature of the position. You got to get over that hump, man, and screw the shutouts. You got to get your team in that position. Unfortunately, that's where the buck stops, and that's hopefully where the buck stops, because you've got to get your team into the third round and into the finals.
All right, we move on. We're going to move on to this series with the Panthers. And we're going to talk about a guy that Mike mentioned last week. We're going to bring him up again. Rob Brendenborg is the first head coach in NHL history to win at least one round in each of his first 7 seasons behind the bench. Right now, 15:08 left in the first period. Florida Panthers lead the Carolina Hurricanes 1-0. Let's focus on Rob. The guy wins series every year. I think he's an underrated coach. I really, really do. So now I guess, all right, Candy, you have a new update? Or is it still 1-0? I think it still is, but the focus is on Rob. He's a heck of a coach, there's no doubt about it, in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, Rod Brindamore, great coach, great player, great person. I always believe in any industry, never mind just sports, that you're always a stronger leader when you can say that I've done what I'm asking you to do. And this guy was the hardest working player that I can remember as a player. This was the guy, I used to call him Rod the Bod. from the time he was a teenager, going to Michigan State, playing on the World Junior team for Canada. I mean, he was a specimen. He was the guy, even before Zdeno Chara, that you'd hear about, after playing a full game, would be in the weight room for 45 minutes after. And, the last guy to leave the building. And it paid off with a Stanley Cup championship finally as a player in Carolina. And I think he brings the same attitude and the same work ethic to his job as a coach. And I think that alone earns him the respect of his players. And if I'm a player and I'm looking at Rod Brindamore, I can sit there and go, he's not asking me to do anything that he hasn't already done.
Right.
So, I think that's what's real important when I see somebody like that in a leadership position like coach.
George.
Another guy from Michigan, huh?
Yeah.
Popping up, don't they?
And a guy that obviously the Red Wings could not. I don't know. I don't even know if they tried to look for him as far as coaching goes when they've had openings or not. But yeah, I echo Mike's sentiment, Scott, because this guy was such a professional hockey player. He played the game with desire, with his heart, and like you've confirmed with us, Mike, he went the extra mile. He went the extra mile. He stayed out there. You hear about guys that want to stay out there and work some more on their shots or work some more on power play or penalty kill, whatever it is. I mean, go the extra and you see what it gets you. Carolina has indeed arrived, and they've arrived for many years now. I'm not just saying this year, but they are a hell of a team, and certainly Rod gets a ton of credit for that. I agree.
Well, the only comparison I'm going to make between Rod is what you guys just said. To me, remember Larry Bird is always willing to go out there and spend the extra time to make himself better. You do that, that's a great example on your players, period.
Yeah.
You lead by example, then everybody respects you. If you're not going to do it, then how do you expect anybody else to do it? And that's where Rod Brindamore gets it. That's why the bird analogy comes up. Without a doubt, we'll keep moving along. The show going at an excellent pace tonight. The Professional Women's Hockey League announces a new expansion team is coming to Vancouver, the League's 7th team on the West Coast. George, what do you thought? I know Detroit was talking about Seattle's inevitable, and Detroit, but Vancouver, they're going to Western Canada. I'll let you talk about this one first, and we'll turn over to Mike.
Yeah, I don't think that Detroit was ready to be, and I know we talked about this on a previous show, Mike and Scott, but I don't think Detroit was ready. And by that, I don't mean that they couldn't attract the fans. As far as the ownership group, I'm not close to what's going on behind the scenes of the women's league, but all I can say is that, yes, there were 2 games here last year and this season. Two of the teams, played at downtown Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, and they drew over 13,000 for each game. But it does go a lot more beyond that, as we know. And Mike, especially, you've been in hockey for so many years. You got to have all the other pieces in place and all that right now. So yeah, there's still talk of Detroit. I don't know. I don't think it was really along the lines of that far advanced. I'm sure Vancouver had its ducks in a row, as they say, a lot longer than anybody in Detroit did. And like I said, even from the media perspective, I haven't heard anything about who would even, try to buy this team or try to get an expansion franchise in downtown Detroit. But the league is new, and maybe they will, but just not now.
It's amazing how you bring that up. I'll turn over to Mike. People talk about taking a MLB team and putting it in Charlotte. Yeah, it's a good market, but I haven't heard anything about an ownership plan or a stadium. That's the thing you have to have in place for you to consider expansion. That's why I don't look upon Charlotte as a high Major League Baseball expansion site, because you don't have either of those. And you're telling me that Detroit isn't further along as much as Vancouver did. And that's a great point. All right, now I'll turn over to Mike, but you just gave me an idea about Charlotte MLB. Thanks. Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I'm a big proponent of women's athletics, women's sports, women's professional sports. But it takes time.
Right.
You can't, rush something in. Look, the WNBA has been around for 30 years now.
Yeah.
They have never made a profit. as a league. In fact, I don't even believe a single team has finished a season as profitable. This year, probably the Indiana Fever will be the first team that's profitable because of Caitlin Clark. If that's if the rest of the WNBA can get out of their own way, things happen the right way. But and I coached. Most people don't even know this, but I coached 2 years of women's hockey at Boston College.
Awesome.
Before it was even as popular as it is now. Before Cami Granado and her sisters, I'll call them, won the gold medal at the Olympic Games. It's it's got to go at its own pace. It's got to go at its own time. I hope they're not just existing right now with the hope that somehow the NHL will take them over and do what the NBA did, which was eventually take them over, maybe for political reasons more than anything else, and attach them to their television contracts and say, okay, ESPN, we're going to give you this deal, but as part of it, you've got to feature them on Sports Center so many times, and you've got to do so many games on TV, and just drag them along. I look at a women's sport right now that I think is making on its own and is very successful, and I'm engaged in the product, and that's the National Women's Soccer League.
Really?
Oddly enough, the new commissioner that took over not even 2 years ago now is Jessica Berman, who was NHL legal counsel for several years. But they're, in my opinion, doing it the right way. And they're expanding the right way. They're expanding into the right size stadiums for their teams. They're going to the right markets, and they're letting the sport catch on and build before they're deciding we're going to go into this market or that market, and we're going to do a promotional game. And maybe we have 13,000, but how many of those tickets are given away, or whatever, let's get some people in the house, that type of thing. I don't think that benefits the sport for women long term. I would just rather see them take their time and grow it properly instead of rushing into. I mean, we're not even finished the second year of this league, and it was a big step, by the way, for them to get these different leagues together and create one women's league, which they did, and good for them. And they start with 6 teams, and now all of a sudden it's expansion. Well, show me that you've got 6 successful teams first before you want to expand, because I've seen the different nights in Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa with big crowds, but I've also seen games in New York where nobody goes.
Wow.
And check out the crowd at USB Arena for the New York team.
Okay.
And the Boston team doesn't play in Boston. They play actually at the UMass Lowell Arena, which seats I think about 7,500 to 8,000, which is fine if that's the right size for them. But they have to be able to legitimately sell tickets for that team in that building first. And then let's start talking about other markets. Let's be successful in the markets we're in now first. I don't know. That's a long-winded discussion, but the bottom line is I want them to be successful. I want women's sports to be successful. I wish they'd pay a little more attention to the National Women's Soccer League than maybe the WNBA or some of these other women's pro sports leagues.
Points well taken. I'll add one thing here, Caitlin Clark. Indiana Fever, by the way, are the first women's team that has 1 million Facebook followers, just so you know. So that just shows you what they're doing over there. I just found that out today, by the way. So, all right, let's continue to something we won't have to be as long-winded now, but it stays in the Pacific Northwest nonetheless. And Baldwin is a one and done in Seattle, with the team missing the playoffs, 7th in the Pacific Division, 35-41-6. Do you think 1 year was enough, or do you think that he wasn't the right guy for the job?
I'm sorry, Dan Bilesma, you talking about?
Yeah, one and done in Seattle.
I I think Seattle was a little too excited about the success they had in their first year, in particular winning a playoff round.
Right.
And I think that sort of distracted from the plan, the fact that it didn't look to me like they had a real plan to develop that team or that organization, and they went from Hackstall to, Bilesmer in year 3, and now Bilesmer's out for a year. Now the GM's gone. I think they got to get their act together. I don't know that this is necessarily a reflection on Bilesmer as much as it's going to be a reflection on they got a new GM there who's been part of the organization, and he's going to have a chance to put his own coach in there and do what they need to do to hopefully build the team and make it better. But I think they got confused or maybe misled by their own success early. And that team that made the playoffs and went around, good for them. But they weren't the Vegas Golden Knights.
I think Dave Hassel did a decent job on his expansion team, but who knows? He was out there. Now you got 2 coaches in 2 years. George, some thoughts, and we have a lot more to get to.
Yeah.
So
I am not a proponent, and you guys know that, of a one and done, or unless something extraordinary happened where he's tied up in legal stuff or did something that was not ethical, then I can see goodbye to a coach. I'm not a big fan of that. Dan's been a good coach, did a hell of a job in Pittsburgh, as we know, and in a couple of years in Buffalo, not so well. So I think that probably, the fact that he's had several losing seasons now as a head coach, still only in his 50s. I mean, there's still room for him and time for him if he wants to continue in coaching. But I think that was kind of like pulling the rug from under him. I'm not a fan of dumping coaches out after 1-year contracts unless it's extraordinarily something happens.
We have 2 more topics. Going to get to a station break. The next one being Cal Clutterbuck is retiring after 17 seasons in the National Hockey League. NHL's all-time hits leader finished his career with 143 goals, 150 assists, and an unreal 4,029 hits. Mike, Cal Clutterbuck, a lot of hits. My goodness.
I mean, I remember Cal Clutterbuck. Really remember him when he was playing in the American Hockey League before he came up into the NHL, when he was playing for the Houston Aeros.
Right.
He was always a guy that played his game right on the line. Not as talented as maybe a Brad Marchand, but played that same style. Was very gritty, but really played on the line of being dirty. Good for him. He was definitely a guy you like to have on your team, and it was better to have him there than to play against him. But yeah, just a good career, real aggressive player. Again, walk the fine line between aggressive and dirty. And good for him. He had a good career, but never really considered him a top 2-line player. For me, he was a 4th-line guy that you could put in the 3rd line and get away with it.
4,029 hits. You think about a lot of the players that score a lot of goals, but how often do you ever talk about a guy getting hits? That's what intrigued me about bringing him up tonight. Go ahead, George. We have one more station break after this. Update Panthers leading the Hurricanes 2-0. Thanks, Andy.
All right. I don't mean that. I'm not trying to sound favored.
That's right.
Anyways, you don't hear about that too often. I mean, in Detroit, we were blessed with guys on the grind line. Every team seems to have, especially the winning teams, the Stanley Cup teams, guys that have bust their butts. And I like the way you put it, Mike. Some hits, might have been a little bit beyond just roughing, but he's a hell of a player. Not afraid to sacrifice his body. Just not, as far as the scoring goes. Yeah, he's not going to bring much to the table, but it is quite a distinction. And leave it to our friend Motor City Scott for bringing that stat up. But boy, that's a lot of hits. God, that's a lot.
And the best reporters that state the obvious, Mike. Every once in a while, you got to come up with something different, right? Isn't our goal here is to educate, inform, and entertain? And I'll tell you, I don't know if there's too many people that are old school than I am, but I believe you got to get it right and you got to get it accurate. You have to have everything you need, and that's one of the reasons why I felt this was an intriguing one to bring up. Nevertheless, all right, we'll talk about the LA Kings playoff drought after losing the Edmonton Oilers. Goes back to 2014, the third longest in the National Hockey League, Mike. Obviously, we know enter Ken Holland. You think he'll be able to get that drought straightened along? Let's just talk about the drought in general, because we're going to be getting into a couple as we progress.
I mean, I think we've talked about this before. The LA Kings were just an afterthought in the NHL for, probably 40 years. I mean, they came in, in that sort of second expansion wave with the Seals and the Sabres and the Penguins and all those teams that joined the original six.
Right.
And they were an afterthought for 40 years. They were a nice place to go and, hang around Hollywood and go to the beach and they weren't a real important part of the sports marketplace all those years when you had the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Rams and the Raiders and teams like that would go in and out. And then things changed. And it didn't change when Wayne Gretzky went there in 1988, 89, like everybody thinks. Yeah, that did a lot for hockey, expanding the game into some areas where it wasn't so popular in this country. But what changed for the LA Kings, in my opinion, was Dean Lombardi becoming the general manager and Daryl Sutter becoming the head coach. And that's what changed the culture of that organization. And they're the guys that put together, with their staffs, of course, that put together a really good team that won 2 Stanley Cups. And when after they won their second cup, the next season, they lost their goalie, Jonathan Quick, to an injury. They failed to make the playoffs, and both of those guys were fired or let go, or however. I don't recall. Maybe their contracts expired and they didn't renew them, but they were both gone. And I think that they created their own problems by getting rid of those 2 guys. Mm-hmm. And Rob Blake, another guy who I know, and he's a fantastic guy. I just don't believe to this day that he was really all in of being a general manager of an NHL hockey team. I just don't think that was on his list of things to do. I think Luc Robitaille became the president out there. Right. Luc Robitaille tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, buddy, I need you to be the GM." And so he did. And I didn't think he did a poor job. It's not easy. I mean, you got to remember they've got a guy, Anze Kopitar, now that was a young kid when they were winning those Stanley Cups, right? They had Dustin Brown, who was a good young captain. Those guys are gone. Kopitar is not yet, but it's a big job to rebuild an organization. It's even a bigger job to try to keep them competitive. But I believe if they had kept Lombardi and Sutter in place there, that they would have been able to let that run go on for a few more years and be competitive and win a few more cups, similar to what the Red Wings did, to what the Blackhawks did, to what the Lightning did. They got in there. They didn't win the cup every year, but they made a run at a cup 4 or 5 times in a decade. I think LA would have done the same thing if they had let those guys who had built the organization, who knew what their plan was, what guys to keep, what guys to move on. I think they would have been better off.
Okay. George?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I mean, Kenny Holland's got a big mission task on his hand. But isn't it ironic that Kenny Holland, who brought a guy named Luc Robitaille into Joe Louis Arena to play for the Red Wings, and now the tables are turned, guys. Kenny's reporting to Luke and his new role. It just tells you about hockey and all those connections that obviously good hockey players and management people, they make over the years. But great summation, Mike. That franchise toiled for so many years, like you said, when it was first granted a franchise in the NHL with the other teams that you mentioned. And now, after winning 2 cups, they're kind of just like, listless. I mean, Scott said the number. What was it, Scott? 14 years, the playoff drought. Oh my God! And we're seeing that in Detroit right now, year after year, no playoffs. But the thing is Kenny's a sharp guy, and maybe he can work some magic there with Luke and turn that franchise around.
Well, the only thing I'll say to close out the topic is don't forget Marcel Dion once upon a time played there in Detroit. He's a good player. He made LA relevant, knowing that he ran out, had a lot of goals. Charlie Simmer, Fred Taylor, some good players when nobody really knew about them. I actually enjoyed the purple uniforms anyway back in the day. But we'll leave it at that because we have a station break on the way. We're only going to be on until 9 o'clock, so I have more information when I get out there. But go ahead, Candy.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by your host, Scott, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword is written by another great panelist here, George Eichhorn. Talks about Scott's 40-plus years in the media business and how it has evolved and changed over those years. Go get your copy today, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there is a plethora of great other content, so go check it out. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. If you want to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. And if you want to be a guest or have topic ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Back to the program.
We're going to get to more Panther stuff in a few minutes, but let's talk about a guy that Mike mentioned last week named David Carl, signed a 2-year extension with the University of Denver, not going to the NHL. We'll also keep it in the Rocky Mountains. The Colorado Avalanche are the first team, MLB, NBA, NHL, to lose 7 consecutive game sevens. We'll start with the first one. David Carl, you said, Mike, he's a heck of a coach, and University of Denver wanted him bad enough to keep him.
Yeah, and good for David Carl for realizing that the grass isn't always greener. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a legendary college hockey coach. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that for Red Berenson. There's nothing wrong with that for Jerry York. I think David Carl is a young guy. He's a lot of good years ahead of him, and he's done a great job with the Denver program, which traditionally is the best college hockey program of all time. They've won more national championships than anybody, but since he's been in charge of that program, they're a class group. He's a class guy. They're very well prepared. They're a threat to win a national title every year. He's got things, humming there. He's, what kid doesn't want to play there? It's a great university. It's a great history of a program. They're going to be competing for a national championship every year with him there, at least in the near future. So, I'm sure he gets paid well. His family's probably happy there. He doesn't need the pressures and a few extra bucks to go to try to be an NHL guy. This to me just looks like a guy that's very comfortable doing what he's doing. He likes to coach hockey, and it's not about his ego. It's about doing what he loves to do, and he's in a place that he loves to do it.
Well, think about it this way. We talked about Dave Haxtell. Maybe he's looking at the Dave Haxtell situation, who had some incredible success in college, and maybe that is an example. Hey, maybe college isn't so bad. He stayed at the University of Denver, done a great job there. Never know. These things are what they are. But let's stay, George, I'll include you, like Mike, on the Avalanche 7, their consecutive game 7. This seems to be a bit top of conversation with a lot of teams. So, George, first of all, what are your thoughts about the Avs struggling in unlucky 7 in their case?
Well, they really, it's a strange and a sad statistic, really. You don't want that hanging over your head. Whether it sinks into the minds of all the players and coaches, I think not. But it does have to wear on you, because obviously the media are going to keep bringing it up and that sort of thing. So you really, really got to find a way to stop it. You got to find a way to end that. and and a win and a good win in Game 7 is obviously what you need, but it's easier said than done. But yeah, it is kind of a quirky thing, and really the Avalanche. I mean, there's another franchise that was so good, and you remember the rivalry against Detroit, and they had some really good years after that too. But you got to get over that hump somehow, because you got to be able to advance, and you can't advance obviously with a terrible streak like that.
Mike,
You can't lose a Game 7 unless you lost three games earlier in the series.
right?
So the problem isn't you're losing Game 7. The problem is you're not winning series. So I anything can happen in a Game 7, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in any sport, right? But I think they got to look more at why aren't we winning series, especially with some of the players we have here. I think that's the bigger problem. I don't think it's just a Game 7 problem.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's revisit a trade. Florida Panthers received Sam Reinhart. Buffalo received Devon Levy, 2022 first-round pick. Jerry Kulik. Panthers took the money and run with this trade. How would you size up that trade, Mike? Sam Reinhart, obviously, it's paid dividends for Florida for sure.
Yeah, it was a great trade for Florida. I mean, Buffalo, we've talked about this before. They're in a bad rut. Guys don't want to play there. I mean, you can't tell me that that players who have a choice are going to choose Buffalo. And young, talented players, when they have a choice or an opportunity through free agency to get out of Buffalo, right now they're going to get out of Buffalo. It's just not a desirable place for players to play, and it's going to be real hard for them to get competitive. The deal for Florida was a great deal, but made even better when they kept him last year.
Right.
You decided to take a little less money to stay in Florida with a team that has a chance to win. And I think there's more players out there that would do that type of thing, take less money to be in a place where they're really happy and they really, have a chance to win. And I think you might see that again this summer in Florida with a guy like Marchand, who might say, like, yeah, I'll take less than what Boston was offering me a few months ago, because you know what? The weather's nice. My wife's happy. And I get to go to the rink in shorts in February. And, oh, yeah, we have a chance to win the cup again.
Right. Okay.
That's what most of these guys, believe it or not, they still want to win. They want to win championships, especially the top players and the elite players. That's what they want more importantly. They're going to make enough money, and they understand that, but they don't have endless chances to win the Stanley Cup.
Okay. Let's continue on some facts. There's one guy that believes in the Carolina Hurricanes is Ralph Williams. Panthers Hurricanes, good matchup. I like the Hurricanes. Well, okay, you have a Hurricanes fan out there, which is a great segue to what we're going to talk about next. George, anything you want to add? Or you want to just keep it rolling here, because I have a few
keep rolling on that one.
Okay, just want to make sure I gave you the proper respect. Okay. That being this, Carolina Panthers have lost 13 straight Eastern Conference Finals games. It doesn't look like it's going to change. The latest update is 3-0. It's only a fact right now. Nobody has to comment. Want to get the facts rolling. 13 straight, looks like 14 tonight. With that said, Mike talked about Brad Marchand is now 5-0 with the Toronto Maple against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7s. First player in history to win 5 against a particular team. And when you think about Carolina, the last time that they actually won a game in the Eastern Conference was 7,698 days ago. Brad Marchand is the daddy for the Toronto Maple Leafs. This guy's having an incredible run. And then which obviously to me is unbelievable, that a guy can have such an incredible run against an opponent. 5-0, think about it. Against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 was the first player in history to win 5. That's a lot. That's in the history of this sport. Mike?
I think he's been fortunate enough to play the Toronto Maple Leafs 5 times in Game 7s. If there's a lot of other players that in the league right now that have never lost a Game 7 of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think Brad Marchand's just been fortunate that he's been on the team that's played that with the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think this is about Brad Marchand. I think this is about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And until they get some leadership on the ice, not behind the bench, not up in the management box, but on the ice, they're not gonna have success. And my prediction is if Connor McDavid gets himself a cup in Edmonton when he has the chance as a free agent, he is going to be going to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he could be what Mark Messier was to the Rangers. He could be for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Wow. That's what they're going to need. They're going to need leadership. They don't have it in the locker room among the players, and they don't have it on the bench among the players, and they don't have it on the ice among the players.
So you heard it here. Take it note, people. I said maybe Connor McDavid could wind up Maple Leafs down the road after he gets the cup. George, I don't think either of us are going to top that one. You're welcome.
No, I don't think so.
You're welcome to try, but let me also add this little nugget. Take all the games versus one franchise. Toronto hasn't won a Game 7 since the Eastern Conference Final in 2004 against the Ottawa Senators. That's how far this thing goes back in the Ottawa Senators. Wow. That is an awful lot. And it's just amazing. And we're going to talk more about the Maple Leafs next week. I want to make sure that we're able to get to a lot of the timely points as well. But Brian Pettit makes it an interesting point. It would be cool if Florida versus Dallas in the Stanley Cup. You never know. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Great things there. Also, you want to talk about a player who's also owned by the Florida Panthers. Get this. Andre Vasilevsky has a 3-12 record in the last 15 games versus Florida. So you think about a guy with the Lightning, arguably one of the best goaltenders ever, and I don't think there's any doubt he'll be in Toronto as a Hall of Famer point. But think about it, 3-12 versus 15 games Florida. I remember the line when Pedro Martinez said the New York Yankees are my daddy, and I'll tell you, Andre may be saying the whole thing in Russian, saying the Florida Panthers are my daddy. All right, Mike, what are your thoughts about Andre not liking it with the Panthers?
I think the other way to look at it is it might be his countryman, Mr. Bobrovsky, that's his dad in the other net at the other end, because I'm guessing that of those 15 games, Bobrovsky was probably in the net at the other end for those games. So I think that's a big factor that Bobrovsky's probably sort of replaced Vasilevsky as that top guy, particularly in the playoffs. But hey, the guy was a great goaltender. He's still a great goaltender. Right now, seems to be at least one guy that's a little better, and they got to oppose him every year now in the playoffs.
Anything you want to add, George?
Oh, no, I mean it's obvious that these players like that have these streaks going. Unfortunately, they got to try to break them somehow. And again, it's not all on one person or one particular goaltender, but it is interesting to say that, like you said, he does look across the ice and he sees the new number one as far as from his native land goes. I like that, Mike.
Yeah, and you know what? You can add 4 more losses there too, because when Bobrovsky was playing for Columbus swept the Lightning that year in a first round. Ups, and Bobrovsky was the goaltender for Columbus when they swept him. So I'm guessing Vasilevsky was in the net for those 4. I don't remember, but if he was, then he's 3-16 against Bobrovsky.
Oh, so Mike, I have a favor. Do you think you can extend me by about 5 minutes or so? I just want to get to what's left. There's not a lot, but get some pretty interesting. That'd be good.
Are you paying me overtime?
Oh yeah, I'll pay you overtime. I'm putting in the next book. There's all kinds of. In fact, I'll pay you overtime. We're buying you BlackRock again the next time. On a couple more things that you want to touch on that are really important. What we're doing. I'll paraphrase them as much as I can. A little update on the Canadian teams. 3 Canadian teams in the second round for the first time in 2004. And now Toronto and Winnipeg are out. Edmonton trailed Dallas 1-0. They lost 6-3 last night. the Canadian teams are dropping pretty quick, Mike. Not looking good for the guys north of the border.
Yeah, but look, there's 32 teams in the league now. You know?
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
you know, of those 32 teams, I mean, of the expansion teams, right? I mean, how many of them are in Canada? None. So, you know, the numbers just are not in favor of Canada these days when it comes to the National Hockey League. There's just a lot more teams in the U.S. The other thing that's not in favor of Canada is the fact that you now have a lot of markets that these players want to play in where the weather's nice. There's a lot of other distractions. Where there's no state income tax.
Right. That's true.
They can do better financially, you know, live in a better climate, and maybe not even have the scrutinization of the fans that they have in these Canadian markets. So maybe there's a little less pressure and a little better lifestyle. So I don't put much stock in that. It's you know, eventually one of these teams is going to break through, and who knows? Maybe it'll be Edmonton this year. I know they dropped game 1, but they'll break through.
Rejoice, Canadian fans. Mike Santos has a little faith. At least they have one team in the race. And when you have Connor McDavid on the Edmonton Oilers, a lot of people are hoping for the Edmonton Florida rematch. I know a lot of people are. And as Brian Pettit said, he'd love to see Florida and Dallas in there. We could get to a scenario next week, but had to bring it up there. It's out there. But we lost 2 with Winnipeg and obviously Toronto. And we'll talk more about the Leafs next week.
If our president gets his way, we won't have any Canadian teams in the end.
That was good. I'm glad that came from you. Yeah, because of the 51st straight. Great stuff. I knew I could count on you with that one. All right. Well, you know, George, you want to stop that one at all? I don't know. I got 2 other things I want to get to.
Yeah, Mike's on target though with that. It's going to happen sometime. We just don't know when. Toronto's been waiting since 1967. So somehow along this line, it's going to break. And you're right, Mike. With 32 teams, it's not easy. We all know it's not easy, but Canada's got to break through one of these years.
Okay, 2 more things to get to, and I promise you get to that Mike gets an opportunity to promote hockey operations, books, and then we're done. Fire up. It's afterwards. So Steve Yzerman has a simple solution for the Red Wings. Okay, he just wants saves only. That's his philosophy. We need a goalie to stop the puck. My goodness. Alex Lyons will be gone. Peter Mrazek, and then you have Cam Talbot. So what's your answer? All we need to do is stop the puck. Boy, this is really tough stuff, right, Mike?
Yeah, there's about 15 other teams in the NHL that have the same problem.
Okay.
It's not easy to find an elite goaltender. I mean, there's a lot of good goaltenders, but it's not easy. The Philadelphia Flyers have been trying to solve that riddle for 30 years. You know, I mean, not quite that, but I mean, basically since Ron Hextall was there. I mean, you know, there's a lot of teams that have been looking for elite goaltenders. The biggest issue with that is goaltenders take longer to develop. And sometimes GMs don't have the patience or can't afford to have the patience to let them develop. And so you see a lot of goaltenders, like the goaltender that's in the net for Florida tonight, Mr. Bobrovsky, who was drafted by the Flyers, you know, spent time in Columbus, and now all of a sudden he's come into his own in the last 5 years or so with the Florida Panthers. They just take longer to develop, you know, and you got to be patient. So they've got some good young guys coming up in the system, right? You know, they got a good kid in college right now who's going to apparently stay there for another year at least. They've got a good kid in Grand Rapids. It just takes time.
Fair enough. Royally quacked. Glad to have you back on. We just need our defensemen to play defense and our goal scorers score goals. My goodness. I love all the simple hockey. All we need to go
that easy.
So here, we talk about simple converts. Okay, Yzerman, we just need to go and just stop the puck more. And now Royally Quack, we just need defensemen to play defense and our goal scorers. Great stuff. Hockey 101. All that has to be done is George, you go ahead and have the final word. One more topic everybody's going to love. That's why I waited till the very end to do it. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, no, I know what Stevie is saying, but the onus falls on him and his coaching staff. They've got to develop these young goalies, and the Red Wings just do not have a good record of that. I mean, you look back and Vernon, of course, was brought over in a deal, and Hasek, and then he had Osgood for a long time, and then he had Jimmy Howard for a long time, but he didn't have the kind of success, obviously, that Ozzy did. All this to say, come on, Stevie, it's not just the goalie, it's your defense. He did not ramp up and improve that defense hardly at all the last year. Now he's got some kids that are young now, so we'll see what happens, but they're pretty much stuck right now until Kosa is ready. And what's the other one? Augustine, that decided to go back to Michigan State as goaltender. Yeah.
All right, now Mike's going to know why I wanted him to stay on just a minute or two overtime, and that's this. When I saw this story, I nearly couldn't believe it. I wanted to wait till next week, but I really felt with George on, I had no choice but to bring it up. So here you have it. There is a new world record. 52-year-old goalie from Hong Kong. Hong Kong, by the way. Mike, now you know why I asked you to stay. Named Emerson Kwang sets a record as the oldest player to ever play in an IIHF Men's World Championship. 52-year-old goaltender. That's why I waited till the end. My goodness. Are you glad you gave me another minute or two to get this story?
Yeah, good for him. I'd like to see him face a 51-year-old Jaromir Jagr, though.
That was good. That was good. I needed. Yeah, but that's a heck of a story, right? 52-year-old guy from Hong Kong. I don't know
Maybe that's the goalie Stevie better sign then.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going behind it. I just think it's great that when I saw this, I had to get it up here.
Yeah.
There you go, Mike. You waited for a 52-year-old Hong Kong guy to come up and be the last segment here on the Sports Exchange tonight.
Wow.
And his name is Emerson Kwang. George, you may get a taste of this probably next Wednesday night. So you want to refrain on it, or you want to make it?
I'm going to hold off on that. Good for him, though. I echo Mike's sentiment, but that's a tough road to play goal at that age, at least on a large scale.
All right. With that said, update from Mike Santos Hockey Operations LLC. We wrap it up here with George and I and Candy last station break. Thanks, Mike, for hanging a couple of minutes, but I had to get the Hong Kong guy in tonight while you were on.
Yep. Well, no, we're plugging along, getting a lot done here and stuff. We'll have big news by September. In the meantime, I would just advise everybody to go to bostonteacompany.com and get yourself a pretty cool T-shirt.
Very good. All right. We'll look forward to having you next Thursday. It'll be Mike and I next Thursday here on the Sports Exchange. George will be doing football business on Tuesday. I want to hope everybody has a safe Memorial Day weekend. I know it's going to be a few days off, so please be safe. We look forward to seeing you next week. So, George, go ahead and promote your book real quick. Candy will take us the rest of the way, and we'll be done.
All right. I write for Scott's publication, the South Florida Tribune, and the media information there is under the contributors. You'll find me, and also I have a little book that I put out a couple of years back, and it's a fun thing. It was a fun project. Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. There's a link to that book straight to Amazon that is at the end of my sports columns at the South Florida Tribune. So appreciate the opportunity to be on. Again, you can reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com is the easiest way, or on Twitter at SandGSports99. Good to be with you guys again tonight.
All right, Candy, takes the rest of the way and also give a preview for what's going on Fire Up.
South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by your host, Scott the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth, and the foreword is written by George Eichhorn. Get your copy today. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Google, and Apple Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there's a plethora of great other content. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to advertise, call Scott 954-304-4941. Or if you want to be a guest on a show or have show topic or ideas, you can always email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. As far as Fire up. We're going to talk some interesting topics. We're going to talk a little NIL money and someone that's got their own jet for NIL money with college football. We're also going to be talking a little baseball. Got to tune in to find out. There you go,
Yeah,
Scott.
Brian, want to get into more hockey? Join us every Thursday night. Mike Santos and I and George when he's not doing football. All right, meanwhile, that does it for this edition of the Sports Exchange Hockey Night, National Hockey Night with us. Meanwhile, we want to thank you very much for joining us. Great turnout all the way around. Enjoyed some of the interaction in the chat. So everybody have yourself a safe Memorial Day weekend, and we want to pay our respects to all the veterans that have given us service over the years as well. Without them, we would not have our freedom as we stand. So thank you very much for joining us. Mike and I will see you next Thursday. And George, you and I have a date with the gridiron. So take care, everybody. Fire up is next. Bye now.